Good morning and blessed Divine Mercy Sunday. This is one Sunday that we all look forward to, I think, all year round. So we do have a lot of themes going today. We just completed the Rosary, so we began everything in the heart of the Mother as we go to her Son, Christ. But it is a very special Sunday, and as Philip just announced, I do have another portion of the Catechism of the Catholic Church on the unity of the mystical body of Christ. And in thinking how I could bring this in, since we have so many different themes going, I'm going to kind of wrap them together. First of all, we certainly have the Catechism on the Eucharist and the unity that we are all together in this. And I think that could not be expressed any more beautifully than certainly in your theme of fidelity. And what does faithfulness really mean? And then also divine mercy and the fact that from all eternity God knew that today would happen. We would be here today. I feel like I'm talking to the creamiest part of the cream, because you're the ones that get up early and you actually come and you want to experience everything that is given to you. And so that means a great deal to Mother Assumpta and myself. And then also certainly the fact that divine mercy is a great gift to the church, and it's one that we, most of us here, and probably all of us here actually as I look out, have lived through the time when a great saint was raised up in the heart of the church from a country of deep persecution, from Poland, who knew what mercy meant in a way many of us don't quite yet, perhaps. Even though we've all experienced it and we all need it. But it was Pope John Paul II who went back to study and to retranslate the works of Sister Maria Faustina in Poland. And I don't want to get into the whole history of that, but it was because of his great love of divine mercy. And he looked at the world, he who had suffered the death of so many of his friends and ultimately family members, etc., in the horrific World War II, who was caught in between the Nazis and the communists as they were fleeing, he and his father, who found his father dead one morning with the rosary in his hand as he came back with food for his father. And his father with that peace, because he knew that the victory had been won. And what does that victory count on? We count on God's divine mercy for all of us. So when John Paul was able to raise up the Feast of Divine Mercy, he called it the happiest day of his life, because probably more than any other mystery, he had lived through that one to understand the resurrection and the fact that we have to love one another, and forgiveness is essential. And we can't say we follow Christ and we love one another if we're not willing to forgive, and how difficult that truly is. Psychologists will say it's the most difficult thing. What do they do when they allow a person to speak to them of all their wounds and the healing process? They're trying to lead them towards a forgiveness. Divine mercy is what we need, and God gives the church in different times of the world exactly what we need at particular times. And so divine mercy is certainly what we need. And I am going to stop at 10 minutes till, because the Blessed Mother took 5 minutes in her rosary, and so she gave me special permission to take those 5 more minutes to talk to you all. I just wanted you to know that. Okay, as we mentioned, John Paul II raised this up. And he said, the message of divine mercy has always been near and dear to me. In a sense, it is the image of my pontificate. So if we looked at the saint that more recently has been canonized faster than I think almost any other, if not perhaps just about the fastest of any, and the church needs him, and we look at him and we consider his life, and we look at the world that he was sent to lead, and we see how much unity, from the Eucharist, the unity, the mystery of unity, he brought back to the world. He called that the mystery of his pontificate. We could think of so many things, but he chose the mystery of mercy, and he chose the beauty of the family. And those are the two things that he really, above all, even above all his work with youth and all his work with social justice and a million other things. But this was it. We know that in your country, he actually died on Divine Mercy Sunday, as Jean pointed out to us, because your star was far ahead of the rest of the world. Everybody else runs after you, but you run ahead. And so because you did that, he actually died on the vigil where we're from, but on the feast where you live. And so he died on the Feast of Divine Mercy, which is a beautiful thing for you to know and to appreciate. He was beatified on May 1st, 2011, by Pope Benedict on Divine Mercy Sunday. And then spin it ahead, not that many years later, April 27th, 2014, he was canonized by Pope Francis on Divine Mercy Sunday. And again, how these all tie together is the fact that if we're not faithful, we can't be merciful, and we will never know unity. We will always put up dividing marks. And the world's biggest problem is divisiveness, and that comes straight from the devil. God is a God of unity. We know this in the Eucharist. So faithfulness is another word for fidelity. And I think it's probably about my favorite virtue. When you look at the world and you say, what do we need? We need fidelity. How many beautiful people spoke to us yesterday of great challenges in their life, but they never are giving up. And we have one right here in the front row who I love this. I cannot wait to get home and tell the sisters this. Nobody's going to believe it, but it's true. And God sent her as a gift to us. And I think of all organs, the heart, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Oh my gosh, do you realize how special this is that God gave this to you, and that you, by fidelity and by God's mercy, are giving this to us? It's just incredible when we think of what God gives us. So fidelity means day by day I give my yes. I don't write the script. I don't ask that it be rewritten. Somehow I find that intense Eucharistic unity that gives me the strength. If unity means sometimes that I'm not one-on-one with someone with whom I must disagree because of a moral problem in the world today, it certainly means heart to heart, as we were saying. I can be one with this person before God. And so there is that unity. And I always think of Hebrews chapter 11. It's like a hall of fame for faithfulness. And it mentions really the history of salvation in the sense of now faith is confidence in what we assure and hope for, and yet we do not see. If we saw it, it wouldn't be faith anymore. God doesn't take that gift away from us. He says, believe though you can't see, because internally you know, you get it, and you live by that. And you do that, the more you do that, the stronger your faith becomes. And it gives us a whole history, so to speak. It points out Abraham and Enoch and Noah and Sarah and Jacob, Moses, Joseph, the Israelites, Rahab, Gideon. And remember, these people aren't sinless. There's some real sinners in this group, but they're in Scripture because they were faithful. And once they understood and had the grace, they were faithful to it. And that's where forgiveness comes in so very strongly. Many people, as we mentioned, Mother Assumpta and I both mentioned this yesterday, have been tortured for the faith, are being tortured today, chains, imprisonment. I love St. Paul when he goes, who has done what I have done? Kind of remind me of Father Ricard. Everyone who loves me is blessed, he kept saying yesterday, basically. And, you know, it's true in the sense of everyone who loves anyone is blessed. Our response is truthfulness. That's very, very strong. We don't say anything goes. We say there is a truth, and it is God. But from there, our response to everything must be mercy and certainly love. And I want to mention someone. I was looking up New Zealand in my excitement before I got here, and I found a hero of yours, I would say a hero of faithfulness, Charles Hatzel Upham. I don't know if you say it that way. Have y'all ever heard of him? Oh, good. Okay. A great hero who received 2 Victoria Crosses during the Second World War. And he was decorated for this. And as Hitler was bombing Poland, and I am Polish lineage, so this just always gets my blood up. In 1939, Upham was enlisting in the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force at the age of 30. He was a sheep farmer, and many of you all have said that you come from farms, etc. So this is in your culture. And he was sent to Greece. He kept rising up because of his leadership, because of his strength, because he knew truth and he went for truth. But he also had this deep faith. And when he was awarded the cross, the Victoria Cross, he said, "This isn't meant for me, it's for all my men with me." Isn't that Christ-like, that we are in this as this unity, as we were mentioning? And so a movie that we have, and maybe you've seen it too, is Hacksaw Ridge. And it features the story, a true story of Desmond Doss, whose heroic deeds at the Battle of Okinawa enabled him to save 75 soldiers during one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. He was a pacifist, never picked up a gun. If he picked it up, he didn't ever use it. And yet he's the one who goes in and saves 75 lives. It's an incredibly powerful film, again, because of his deep faith and his fidelity to his faith. Well, I think your Upham's company, is very close to the same situation. He himself broke his ankle. He had mortar shells and shrapnel throughout his body, dislocated his shoulder, broke his leg and his foot. He goes to an Italian hospital, and they respect him. But he tries to escape 3 times. They catch him 3 times. I just love his tenacity. So one night he's escaping again, and from the German barracks. And so the German guy with the machine gun sees him, and he watches him go over the fence. And they said later, "Why didn't you shoot him?" And he goes, "I can't kill a man of such courage." Isn't that incredible? I could not kill a man of such courage. He's a hero. We have heroes in our lives. I think of my parents. Hopefully you think of your parents. You think of the people who have that you meet and that you know, and that you yourselves are heroes too. I realize that at this very moment, right behind us, Christ has just been brought, and we see Deacon Mark kneeling in front of him. And you don't all have to turn and look, but just know he's watching all this too. He's behind us on this Divine Mercy Sunday. He's just been brought out for Eucharistic adoration up there. And you think of these great people in our lives. And I want to mention also, somewhat quickly, because there's just not that much time, but there are so many themes. I want to mention my own community for 4 sisters to leave another community that they dearly love and to branch out and begin another community. So many of you all have remarked how beautiful it is to see Mother Assumpta and myself in our habits. And we know exactly what you're saying. You're not saying we're beautiful. You're saying these habits represent God, and isn't God beautiful? And we know that, and yes, He is. And that is why our community has chosen to have this great gift that no matter where we go, you should fly with us on some of our flights, not literally in outer space, like Michael over there, but I'd like to do it. I would love to get this habit in outer space. I don't think I could do some of the things he was describing yesterday, but in any case, but how beautiful it is, because everybody sees God when they see the habit. They think of God, even if they're not Christian. Somehow there's somebody who's done something with a totality, a fidelity, a commitment that the world has difficulty with today. And there's an expression of honor. Again, not for us, but how many will come up and ask us to pray for them, their families, their intentions, their sufferings. It's kind of like, I remember John Paul II one time said to a group of women religious who were discussing whether or not to take off the habit, and he was with them, and he said, "Don't take Christ off the streets. It represents God." And so our community, 21 years ago now, was founded in New York under John Cardinal O'Connor, who we like to see get canonized. And he was just like a father to us, just another saintly hero in our lives. And we meet these people. And so he founded the community, and then we came to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and immediately began getting vocations. As we drove into Ann Arbor, there was a young girl, which we did not know until the next morning, who was driving behind us. Her lights were coming through our car. It was pouring down rain, and she thought she saw sisters. She ended up the next morning ringing the doorbell at 5:45. We get up at 5, or 5:15, I should say, for Eucharistic adoration every morning for an hour. And she rang the doorbell and she said, "I followed you last night. I didn't want to bother you. It was too late. But I think I have a religious vocation. What do I do?" People are hungry for God. One of my favorite thoughts of John Paul II in his life is when he first went back to Poland, that famous June 9th, when everything started changing with solidarity being raised up and the wall started really crumbling, the wall of division set there by the evil one, as we already said. And what did the people do? He told them, "You must be merciful." Well, they were caught because the emotions are so strong to seek justice. And who doesn't want to do that and set things right? But they were caught, and there they were living under such sacrifice, and so many of their families, every single family could tell you the people who had died from the totalitarian regimes that captured this incredible country. And they knew this personally, and yet, how did they get rid of their excess energy? They said for about 15 minutes, they broke out in, "We want God." And there were all the soldiers standing around with the guns pointing at them. They couldn't shoot because that's not a war cry that they understood. But in reality, for those who have faith, it was a war cry. We want God. And they kept saying that over and over. And I think that's the cry of the human heart. We want God. We all do. It's the unifying that the Eucharist, the altar of the world, offers back to the Father. We want you. We want God. And so the community, as we have mentioned very briefly, really did grow quickly. Immediately, we had postulants, the girls entering. Immediately, we were able to, through the formation, which is a good 8 years, very solid. Mother Sumter said about super solid, so that we know who we are and we profess our fidelity to the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Probably all of y'all have gotten these little quickie cards, but you can look online or whatever because they're there. And Michael's going to come visit us when he visits his son sometime right there in Ann Arbor, because his son is about maybe 10 minutes away studying something similar to his father. Isn't that the way it goes? When we've got it good, we hand it on. And even if your children don't want what you've got, your faith, your love, your compassion, you give it anyway, because there will come a day they will get it, and they will yell, "We want God." And Mom and Dad had God, and I want Him too. We have to keep being saints lighting up the world today. That's what we're called to. We're not called to blend in. We're called to stand apart. We're called to be authentic. And so I think that's why God has given us so many vocations. So we have 135 right now. And that includes a girl from Australia who, not this summer, but next summer will make her vows. She's just a novice. And she was so excited. And she said to give you all her love. And I said, "Well, do Australians love New Zealanders?" And she goes, "Probably somewhat more than New Zealanders might love us." As one of you said, it's the third island of New Zealand. It's on the west side, is Australia. So I'll take that little tidbit back to her. But in any case, yeah, because we need spiritual moms in the world today. When people see the sisters, it's mom. It's an image of Mary. Just as the priest is an image of Father, of God. He is an alter Christus, as the church teaches. We need spiritual motherhood. We need to get back to the family in the church, the family in everybody's home. And so that spiritual motherhood is essential. And I think for this reason, God is sending us. You wouldn't believe the variety that we have. They have to be at least 18. They can be into their early 30s. That gives you an incredible variety. We have girls straight out of the Air Force. We have girls straight out of homeschooling. We have all the in-betweens. I could go on and on and on. And the beautiful thing is to see how creative God is with every single group, because there's groups that enter on August 28th. So the group that's going to be entering this August 28th is praying very hard for each of you right now. I've asked, and they're just like, we're with you, sister, we're with you. We know we've got to get this started early. So we're right there, those spiritual moms coming down the pipeline for the future. And they love you, and they want this. And so we do get girls, as we mentioned, from really all over and all different kinds. But the average age is about 21. And I think the world would say, isn't that a little bit young for young people to know their minds? Are you kidding me? Women know their minds early on. They need the support. They need your prayers. They need your love. They need you to pray for them. And when you find a young woman who might have a vocation, to say, do it. How many? There was a poll that just came out, and about 80% of those that entered the priesthood and were ordained, entered 8 years ago, were ordained this past summer, someone said to them at some point, have you thought of being a priest? Well, they need to hear it. The world doesn't send that message. We need to say, gosh, how beautiful if. And if God wants you to be a husband and a father, a wife and a mom, how beautiful. Do God's will. So you can know happiness, and you can know completion, and you can set the world on fire with love of Him. I want to kind of quickly end with a beautiful saint that I think all of us have devotion to. And again, I ended with a very young girl saint. She died at 12, Blessed Imelda, yesterday. And today I want to just kind of end my second one with the young guy saint, a boy, Saint Tarcisius. You know, I think, and Mother mentioned this too yesterday when she said, do we stop and think, what would I be like if I were living in the time of Christ? Would I believe that He really was God? Would I have been standing underneath the cross? Would I have been running away? How long would it have taken me? Would I have been there with John and Andrew as a disciple of John the Baptist even before Christ? We don't know these things. But I remember a sister saying when I was a little girl being taught by the sisters, you would be the same person that you are when you go into the church and you kneel before the tabernacle. Do you really believe that that's God? If you do, you would have probably believed that was God when He was on earth. And that made me feel good because I've always believed in the Eucharist. I come from a very Catholic family. It's just kind of handed on. And so I thought maybe I would, but my question will always be, would I have the courage when He was crucified to stand by Him? And of course, as we know, most of the apostles who knew Him the best did not. And yet, what is fidelity, the theme of your conference? It's saying yes to the unknown and keeping the yes. Mary at the Annunciation. Yes, God, whatever you will. You're the only reason I'm alive. Do with me as you will. That's all I want. So as we look at Tarcisius, we think of the very first century. The Romans were the powerful ones, and we can think of who's powerful, so to speak, in the world's eyes today. There's many parallels. Life doesn't really change that much. We come at our century, but it's the same temptations the evil one's always been after. And God gives us the grace at any moment for the yes to Him. And the Roman soldiers were known to be cruel, and they were very feared. So St. Tarcisius is the young little boy. And the emperor is Valerian, who is known to be killing the Christians, and because he hates them because they're supposed to believe in a God, and of course he's the God. And so therefore, how can they be so stupid? We'll kill them, and then we don't have to deal with this silly philosophy, in his mind, philosophy anymore. Little did he have any clue, possibly. And so the Christians were beaten and they were made fun of and they were used as an example. If you follow that Christ that you talk about, this is what's going to happen to you. And we know the age of martyrdom it is, even though today's age is much more an age of martyrdom than even that age was. But we also know that they would hide for the Eucharist because even if they were found, it was worth it to give your life for the Eucharist, to give your life for your faith. And so they would hide in the catacombs many times, and other places too. But the entrance to the catacombs were very secretive. And so they were only given, not the entrance itself, the many entrances, because it's 500 miles under Rome, actually, but the ones where the masses were. And so these secrets were handed down to those who have the true faith. And there's a whole catacomb of just the popes and catacombs of the martyrs, etc., throughout the underground Rome that you can visit today. But in one of these catacombs one day, the bishop was offering Mass. And so he was very conscious because he had been asked by a lot of people, so-and-so is sick. And I was thinking about this yesterday morning when this beautiful couple gave the whole talk about, visiting the sick and bringing communion to the sick and how good the church is that he allows you to be lay ministers to do this work. And we certainly need this. And so the bishop was asking everyone to pray, but the people were like, okay, we need to bring the Eucharist to prisoners. Which meant someone had to have the courage to take the Eucharist out of the catacombs. Now, that would be great if nobody would suspect. But the Christians lived a little bit differently. So there was already you know how the world kind of looks down on your morals and the way you might choose to live and the things you might say. They suspect you might be a believer. Well, this was obviously the same. And they didn't see you killing people and you betraying Christ so they kind of were watching some of these people. So this little boy, Tarcisius, steps up and says, I will do it. Give me the Eucharist and I will take him to the prisoners and to the sick. And the bishop said, you're too young. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to. And the little boy says, no, I'll be safer because nobody will suspect me. They won't suspect a young child can be. And how many times do we look at children and think, how holy can you really be? How much do you know? Children, as of John Paul II, canonizing little Jacinta, who was 7 years old, and Francisco, and we know the intense holiness is there. And we need to support little children in this great holiness. However, as the little boy's leaving with the Eucharist, up come some friends, and they needed another companion for the game that they were playing. So they said, come on, you join us. And he said, no, I'm on an important mission. And they said, what kind of mission? And he said, I just need to go somewhere. And of course, he's kind of clutching the Eucharist where your heart is, and he's clutching the Eucharist, and they're like, what do you have? And so they start mocking him, and then they start saying, he's one of those Christians. He has that Christian mystery. That's the way they called it, the mystery, because of course they didn't have a clue. He has that Christian mystery, so they start beating him up. And eventually, as we all know, because we know the story of Tarcisius, and he's great to tell to First Communion children, etc., they say, get the mystery from him. And Tarcisius is being beaten, and they're throwing rocks at him, etc. And then this particular man comes up and he says, what are you doing? And they said, he has the Christian mystery and we want it. We need to know what it is. And so this particular soldier runs them away, and they get fearful and they run away. And he picks up the limp body of Tarcisius, and Tarcisius knew who he was because he had just come from Mass, and this soldier had been there, but he couldn't have carried the Eucharist because they would have suspected him. And so the man takes the little boy and his limp body, and this is beautiful. He says, the little boy says, I am dying, but I have kept God safe. And he hands the treasure to the soldier, who then tucks it into his tunic. Carry him to prison and to the sick for me. And then the soldier bends over and says, greater love hath no one than to give his life for his friend. Don't be afraid to bring Christ to the world. This will be the last time I will be able to talk to you, and then we will be going back across the Pacific, but we're one in the heart of Christ. And how important is that heartbeat? And how important is it to realize across the world, it's a small place. We will meet in heaven, and that's what's important. And it is the Eucharist that unites us. And I want to end with the words of St. John Vianney. When we are before Christ in the Eucharist, let us open our heart. Our good God will open his. We go to him, he comes to us. The one to ask, the other to receive. It's like breathing between one breath for each other. May God bless you. Count on our prayers continuing. You become part of our family, And if you're in the States and you come to Michigan, come see us and send us some vocations. You know who they are. We need a New Zealander so that this Australian can stay humble. God bless you all. Thank you.